Hi, I'm Dr. Jay Fry, President, CEO, and co-founder of Identimetrics. Identimetrics is the leader in providing biometric finger scanning identification solutions for schools. As a former school principal, I've shared your headaches over the administrative challenges of handling a school's many day-to-day demands. In fact, Identimetrics was started because of my problems with missing ID cards, forgotten ID numbers, and inaccurate student records. I'm delighted you've decided to join me in order to learn about how schools all over the country are using finger scanning technology to greatly improve the efficiency and operations in their schools. I'm going to talk about what biometrics is and how it can be used to improve the operations in your school. In just a few minutes, you'll discover how powerful finger scanning biometrics is and how it will eliminate the problems associated with the old-fashioned methods of student identification like ID cards and numbers. Let's start at the beginning and find out just what biometrics are. We'll briefly discuss 5 areas. Biometrics are automated methods of recognizing a person based on a physiological or behavioral characteristic. They include face, fingerprint, hand geometry, handwriting, iris, retina, vein, and voice. Anything that's a part of you. Believe it or not, biometrics is not a new technology. The ancient Egyptians used bodily characteristics to identify workers to make sure they didn't claim more provisions than they were entitled, just like governments today are using biometrics to lessen fraud. Chinese merchants in the 14th century used palm prints and footprints to identify children. Fingerprint recognition is by far the most developed technology today. It's trusted, cost-effective, and easy to use. So why should we use biometrics in schools? To save time and money and improve your operations. To have accurate and auditable records for essential governmental funding. To know who's in your school and where your students are at all times. There are major differences between finger scanning and fingerprinting. Let's start with law enforcement software on the right. Law enforcement fingerprinting software captures rolled images of all 10 fingers. Rolled images capture unique identifying points on the entire finger surface and in order to collect the maximum number of unique identifying points. The purpose is to identify suspects based on fingerprint images taken directly from a crime scene. Actual images of all 10 fingerprints are stored. Finger scanning identification software for commercial or student identification uses use flat images of only 2 fingers to create templates. Flat images reveal the center of the finger and require only a minimum of unique identifying points in order to make a match. The purpose is to identify people already enrolled in the software. No images of the fingerprint are stored and none can be recreated from the software. Here are some interesting facts about finger scanning biometrics. Finger scanning is fast, accurate, cost-effective, and secure. No fingerprint images are ever stored, no fingerprints are taken, and only unique points are identified. Fingerprints cannot be recreated from the encrypted template. Every person has unique fingerprints, even twins. Biometric sensors are no dirtier than doorknobs. So how does finger scanning process work? The finger is scanned by a finger scanner. The software identifies unique points. No fingerprint images are stored. The points are transferred to a binary number. The number is encrypted and linked to the user's ID number and stored in the database. When the user returns, the same process happens and the new template is compared to the database until a match is discovered. The matching ID number is sent to the host application and the user's account is found. All this happens in about a second. It's impossible to recreate the fingerprint from this data, and privacy is ensured. We're going to learn how a finger scanning ID system can be used to improve operations throughout your school. Let's talk about what to look for in a finger scanning ID system. Think of all the ways students need to be identified in schools. at the school entrance to take daily attendance or for security to keep unwanted visitors out, in the cafeteria to make sure the right account is credited and records are accurate for audits and reimbursements, and of course, to speed up the serving lines, in the library to know who's checked out materials, in the nurse's office to make sure the right children are getting the right medical treatment no matter who's working in the nurse's office, in the classroom for attendance, and in the attendance office for late attendance or early dismissal. It's important to know who's at school and who's not, especially in an emergency. And at after-school activities to be sure students attending are allowed to be there. Everybody knows kids forget stuff. They forget their keys, their lunch money, their ID cards, their ID numbers. Just about everything gets left behind sometime. The most common kinds of identification currently in use are swipe, barcode, or picture ID cards, pins, and of course, visual identification. Each of these methods creates its own issues, delays, and is also a drain on the school district's time and resources. Cards are regularly lost, mutilated, shared, and sometimes stolen. Pins are easily forgotten, especially with young children. And visual identification is a poor solution, especially with today's considerable security concerns and reporting issues. Accountability issues are a major concern in schools. When kids forget their ID cards or ID numbers, or when teachers take sloppy attendance, the records are inaccurate. Poor records require additional audits and also slow or reduce reimbursements. In addition, it takes even more time and money to monitor and correct the problem. Worst of all, schools are being required to repay money if their records are inaccurate. Today, schools nationwide are using finger scanning technology as a part of their best practices to ensure accountability and accuracy. When a student touches a finger to a scanner, there's no doubt about his or her identity. There's no risk of lost ID cards or forgotten pins. There's no chance of another student checking someone into school or a class for attendance. There can be no fraudulent use of students' account in the library or cafeteria. Finger scanning ID also provides anonymity and eliminates any stigma for students who receive free or reduced-priced lunches. Increased participation in the $14 billion national school lunch and breakfast programs translates into more funding for schools. A recent study showed that finger scanning improved the efficiency in the cafeteria serving lines by 30%, and school billing accuracies were raised to 100%. So how should a finger scanning ID system work? It should integrate seamlessly with your third-party software applications that take ID card or ID number input, providing accurate and irrefutable records. So you can also use it to identify students at the school entrance in order to be sure that the students coming into the school belong there, in the library in order to more accurately track books and other assets, in the nurse's office to ensure the students receiving medication are properly identified and receiving the correct medications, for after-school activities to ensure that the students who are there are supposed to be there, in the cafeteria so students can pay for meals and schools can receive government funding for free and reduced meals. A finger scanning ID system should provide identification in all of these areas at the same time with one common database, eliminating the need for cards and pins and ensuring accuracy. Schools continue to find new ways to use technology, for instance, dances, sports, field trips, employee time and attendance, band and orchestra attendance, etc. So, are other schools using finger scanning identification? Sure. Schools nationwide, including Alaska and Hawaii, use the Biometrics finger scanning ID system. The system is proven, trusted, and effective. Here's a small sample of schools already using the ID system. Let's look at a few case studies to see how schools are using biometrics for identification. Schools all over the country are using it in a variety of ways. Here are some examples. Greater Newark Charter Schools serves students in grades 5 through 8. They needed a student ID system that would not only give them the highest level of security and safety for their students, but would also make sure that the student records were accurate and not subject to human error. With their finger scanning ID system, the students are enrolled only once, and they can be identified to multiple software applications with a simple finger scan. Now they use the ID system for attendance, for breakfast and lunch in the cafeteria, and to identify students in the nurse's office. The state agency can come for an audit unannounced at any time. The breakfast, lunch, and attendance records are auditable and accurate in real time every day. They know who is in the building at all times without having to rely on teachers doing the attendance by hand with the potential of a missing child. In case of a lockdown, they know that all the students are accounted for. As Karen Miro-Drew says, we use technology to work smarter, not harder. Mannheim Central School District was using a point-of-sale system that required parents to prepay their children's accounts. Students used cards to access their accounts, much like the accounts that you use. The problem was the lack of security with the cards. Students shared their cards. They also forgot their cards, especially in the middle school where they weren't permitted to carry their backpacks to class and often didn't have pockets in their clothing, so they didn't have any place to keep the cards. Misplaced or lost cards had to be paid for by parents. The principals and food service staff spent too much time talking to disgruntled parents about the problems with their accounts. Their goal was simple: find a way to guarantee the security of the students' accounts. When someone puts money in a bank, they know their money is safe. Mannheim School District wanted the same level of security. They were opening a new middle school complete with a state-of-the-art technology. They chose a finger-scanning ID system to secure their accounts. How's it working? The plan was to roll out the middle school in year 1 and the high school the following year. The plan changed because of pressure from parents and administration to roll out the high school right away. Best of all, there has not been one call about account problems. They reached their goal. White Hat Charter Schools is one of the largest charter school operators in the U.S. Their learning skills charter schools help students who cannot make it in the regular public schools. Many of their schools are in states that are not very friendly to charter schools. Consequently, White Hat needs irrefutable records that can stand up to rigorous audits in order to protect their charter. After trying cards, pins, and even hand scanners, they tried a finger-scanning ID system. They used it to take attendance as the students entered the building, thus providing that irrefutable proof of attendance. Lady Liberty Academy is a technology-rich school with an administration committed to science and technology. For the administrators, late students were a problem. Parents would drop their children off at school on time, but that didn't mean the students came into the school and went to class. Instead, they would hang around with their friends outside the building. The students would then claim they were at school on time, and parents would call to challenge the records. The school implemented a finger-scanning ID system to work with their student information system software in the main office to check in late students. The ID system provides irrefutable proof that the student signed in, and because of the timestamp, there are now no issues regarding the accuracy of the reporting. Now, no one can call to question the tardy records. The school also wanted to harness the power of the ID system for their cafeteria reports. Most of the students are in the free and reduced lunch program, and they needed reports with unquestionable accuracy. For obvious reasons, they didn't want ID cards or numbers, so finger scanning was the perfect solution. The school reports that the finger scanning ID system has sped up the lunch lines tremendously and ensures the records are accurate. The state auditor used to spend days going through the paperwork and manually generating reports. Now the auditor is finished in just a few hours. Initially, the school was a little nervous since the lunch staff had limited computer experience, but the implementation was seamless and it was simple for the staff to use. By the way, the student in the picture is too shy to talk, so the cafeteria ladies had difficulty identifying her by asking her by name. With the finger scanning ID system, she doesn't have to talk at all. Hope Charter School's main issue was accountability. They needed to have 100% accurate attendance records and food service records every day in order to get timely reimbursements. The old-fashioned way of taking attendance wasn't just working and cost them money. They actually had to repay money because of inaccurate records. Hope wanted a complete solution that would quickly and accurately get the students processed into their SIS and the cafeteria POS. They also needed it to work for late attendance and early dismissal. The students scan in when they enter the school at the door, entrance. Anyone who is late or leaves early scans as well. They have another scan location in the cafeteria where the students can scan when they get their breakfasts and lunches. According to Carl King, the Director of Operations, the attendance and food service reports are 100% accurate, and their attendance numbers have actually gone up because students know if they don't show up in person, they will be marked absent. They've been able to eliminate the homeroom period and increase instructional time. They know who is in the building at all times, and they're ready for an audit at a moment's notice. They plan to set up scan stations at every classroom so they can take attendance at every period and monitor the comings and goings in the hallway and restrooms as well. Cost-effective finger scanning technology is here today with practical uses for schools. It's a perfect solution for schools who are dissatisfied with the current student identification systems in place such as pins and swipe cards. Finger scanning technology provides irrefutable proof of identification. Unlike the complicated and expensive systems in the past, finger scanning identification is simple, cost-effective, and technology-friendly. And best of all, the students will never forget or lose their ID. Thanks for joining me for this presentation. I'm sure you have questions. Please join us at the Identimetrics booth where we'll be happy to answer them all. We look forward to meeting you there.